Hey everyone, welcome to this video. Today we'll be focusing on core support. So the core of our body is often thought of as sort of these front abdominal muscles, but in fact our core is actually 360 degrees around our whole body, and it takes up a lot of space through the torso. So today we'll look at a few floor-based practices that you can include in your regular yoga practice, and with the intention of creating a connection to the muscles of the whole core. So today you may like to have a block handy. If you don't have any blocks, for this one you might like to use a folded up towel as a substitute. So we'll begin laying down, and you'll notice that I'm not even using a yoga mat. You absolutely do not need a yoga mat for this, so totally your call to use one or not. So, invitation to find a comfortable position for laying down. Okay, we'll take a couple minutes or moments here to settle in. And you finding a comfortable place for your head. You are welcome to rest your hands wherever feels comfortable. And your eyes can be open or closed. Now, an invitation to begin by noticing the back of your body, the parts of you that are making contact with the floor. You may like to really feel in and get curious about those points of connection. Perhaps sensing texture, feelings of pressure, maybe a sense of firmness or softness from whatever's beneath you, or perhaps any other attributes that you can notice with the back of your body in contact with the floor. And if it feels right for you today, you may like to take a moment to release effort into that connection. So almost as if your body is becoming a little bit heavier, a little bit softer, of allowing gravity to work its magic as you sink down towards the earth. You may like to invite a sense of softness through your low belly. And perhaps through the shoulders and jaw. And if it feels right for you today, you may begin to deepen your breath, regardless of whether you're breathing in through your nose or your mouth. And if your hands are placed on your body, so noticing the movement that occurs as you breathe. You may even like to place your hands on low belly for this. Observing the rise and fall of your belly as you breathe. What does it feel like to take a deeper breath? What sensations might be present? And an invitation to Take a few more breaths just like this. And in your own time, option to bend your knees if they're not already bent so that your feet come flat to the floor. Walk your feet out toward the outside of your hips, maybe even a little wider for some. And then perhaps gently lower or wash your knees from side to side. We like to move nice and slowly and mindfully here, just beginning to invite some gentle movement and rotation through the hips, low back. Option to add your head and neck by turning your head away from your knees as they lower one side, and then opposite way on the other side. There's a little bit of a warm up here before we get into our more engaging strength-based work. Feel free to continue this movement as long as you'd like. And when you do feel ready, gradually move your knees back up to center. And then from here, snugging your shoulder blades underneath you, you may like to lift one knee at a time so that your knees come up toward your upper body. You could place one hand on either knee. The option to give your knees a little squeeze here, maybe gently rock from side to side. In your own time, slowly coming back to stillness. And then from here, beginning to circle your knees in one direction. So you can keep your hands on your knees as you create these circles. Or you could release your hands and circle your knees in a little bit more of an active way. So as you do this, what you might consider is keeping your back ribs really engaged and down onto the floor. If you're not super familiar with a core work like this as well, you could think about your low back flattening into the floor. Okay, and really working to maintain that connection, which will help to protect your spine. Okay, when you feel ready, switch directions. Okay, you might even notice here your core muscles, the supporting muscles through your midsection, work without you really needing to do too much. They fire, they kick in when we move our limbs. So in moving your legs, you may notice that things are starting to fire up through the belly, through low back, and through the sides of your body. Okay, so you may like to consciously connect to that sense of engagement and see about maintaining that, but still remembering to breathe. Okay, gently coming back to center as you feel ready, releasing your feet to the floor. Here you may like to grab one of your blocks or your rolled blanket or whatever you'd like to use to place between your knees. Okay, once again, feet come back to the floor. And we'll look at some pelvic tilt. So this brings some movement in through the hips. Okay, so from here, really connecting your low back to the floor. So see about pressing your low back into the earth quite firmly. Okay, and then we'll do the opposite. So from here, rolling your hips forward so that you begin to get a little bit of a space through underneath your low back. It's a little bit of a gap between your back and the floor. And here your tailbone kind of tips towards the earth. Okay, so an invitation to cycle between these two movements. Flattening low back on the earth, hips tip back this way, and then tipping hips forward away from you so that your low back lifts. You may like to add breath. So exhaling as your low back flattens and inhaling as your low back lifts. Exhale, low back flattens down against the earth. And inhale as your hips tip forward and low back lifts. Now an invitation to continue exploring this movement for a few more cycles. You may like to really slow your movement down with the pace of your breath. So breath is the guide here. So from here, we'll add in some optional bridge movement. Okay. So starting with your low back in contact with the earth at the beginning of your exhale, beginning to press into your feet to gently roll up the spine, lifting hips up to the top of the exhale, and then inhaling to begin to lower nice and slowly, rolling down the spine to the earth, tipping all the way forward so you get that lift of the low back, the end of that inhale. Exhale, press low back down, begin to lift hips off the earth, rolling up. And inhale to slowly come back down, nice and gently. Rolling forward and through, low back lifts. And on the exhale, low back flattens down, beginning to roll up the spine. Inhale as you start to lower back down. All the way through, low back lifts, hips tip forward. And exhale, low back flattens as you begin to roll up. So you may like to continue this again for a few more cycles, really exploring the full length of your inhales and exhales. So if we follow the breath, the length of the breath, it causes us to slow our movement down quite a lot, which can actually make movement more challenging. So we're not working with momentum, but working with the natural strength of our muscles. So feel free to keep going for however many rounds you'd like. Okay. And really also thinking about this block between the knees. Once you're familiarized with the movement, you can also use the block as a place of stability. So perhaps pressing your knees together, which will also help to engage through the transverse abdominis, which are some of the deepest core muscles that we have at the front of the body. Okay, so feel free to keep going. You can even pause the video and do some more if you'd like. Okay, this will be my last cycle here. And coming back to rest in what feels like a neutral position. Here, you may like to release the block for just a moment, maybe widen your feet, have your knees touching in. Option to rest here in stillness. This is constructive rest pose. Or you could once again find your windshield wiper legs, knees lowering gently from side to side. So our core muscles are what stabilizes our spine when we're in movement. Having this really intentional connection to the supporting structures of our body can help us to notice, what's going on when we move. It's that idea of interoception, of noticing what's happening within our bodies. So if you're somebody that experiences low back pain on sort of a regular basis, then core work can be really helpful for a lot of people who experience that. Of course, it depends on what the underlying cause is. But for a lot of people, myself included, core work is a really great therapeutic way to support the health of the back. Okay, so from here, invitation to take your block once again, or whatever you're using, to place back between knees. And then from here, gently drawing both knees up towards you so that your feet are your legs are about 90 degrees. Okay, so again, noticing low back and connection with the floor. Okay, the further your knees are back towards your upper body, the less intense the strain or stress will be on the core. Okay, so what you might want to keep in mind here is that low back connection to the floor as the place where you really want to focus your attention. So maintaining that connection throughout this whole movement. Okay, so here you may like to bring your knees towards you any amount. And then taking a big exhale, and as you inhale, you may like to stretch your arms up overhead, maybe behind you, as you lower your knees away from you any amount, keeping that connection of the low back. Exhale to gather back into center. Inhale to expand. Exhale, gathering into center. Inhale, expanding out from the core of your body. Exhale. Now, continuing on at your own pace. If you are interested in adding another layer here, the further you move your knees away from you, the more intense it might get. So you could start to straighten your legs, keeping the low back in connection with the floor. And you're moving whatever distance is best suited for your body today in this moment. Invitation to explore 5 more on your own. Taking your time, remembering to breathe. Take breaks whenever you'd like. When you feel ready to release that movement, you could remove your block once again. Maybe keep your knees bent if that's comfortable for you. You could even widen them here to give yourself a little bit more space. Perhaps intentionally softening through low belly. Perhaps letting your hands support your legs here, so a little less effort through the fronts of the hips, through the thighs. Option to rock a little side to side. And we'll look at one more movement for this type of core work, and then we'll do a stretch afterwards to let everything soften out. Okay, so once again, Invitation to bring knees to 90 degrees or even back a little further towards you. Okay, so from here, we'll do a bicycle type movement. So some people may like to have hands behind head with elbows wide. The trick here will be to not use your hands to really crunch your neck up. You want to try to maintain softness through the neck. So I actually often won't do that because it brings too much tension into my head and neck, shoulders, but you may be somebody that likes to try that. So go ahead. Okay, so from here, starting to extend one leg long and then drawing it back to center. Opposite leg reaches long and then drawing back to center. So remember, you can choose how far or close your knees are toward your upper body to moderate intensity. Okay, just checking that your low back is really connected to the earth. Okay. So at your own pace, exploring this movement. You may like to inhale as one leg expands and exhale as your knee draws back. Nice and slow, controlled. Inhale and exhale as knee draws back. Side to side. Okay, you can also lower your legs a little bit closer to the floor to kind of increase intensity if that's what's right for you. It's possible some of you may feel a strong sensation through the fronts of your hips as well, your hip flexors, psoas muscle. Now, this is great work for that as well. So again, continuing for as long as you'd like. It'll be different for everybody. So I will finish up with one more on either side. And when you feel ready to complete the movement, you could lower one leg at a time, feet to the ground. Again, perhaps finding constructive rest pose, maybe lowering knees a little side to side, or taking any other movement that feels right in your body at this moment. So that could really look like anything. And you may like to take a couple big breaths in through your nose and sigh it out. Inhale fully and let it go. Invitation for one more like that. So now our hip flexors have done a lot of work as well, and it can be helpful to release them after. So one way that I like to do this is to take a block. Okay, and again, you could use something of a different height as well, even a folded towel, a firmer blanket. You just want something that's fairly firm. Okay, so like you're setting up for bridge, lifting up hips to place the block or whatever you're using underneath the back of your hips. So checking that it's not necessarily on your low back, but actually further down so that your hips are really rooted and centered onto the support. And you may wish to kind of rock a little side to side as you settle in here. And what you'll want to check for is just that your low back feels okay here. So we don't want to increase or encourage any sense of pain or pinching or uncomfortable feelings through the low back. So if for any reason it's not quite right for you with whatever height you're using, then feel free to lower down to something a little less high off the ground. And you can also actually do this without anything under your hips as well. But using a little bit of height helps to kind of get deeper into the fronts of the hips. Okay, so from here, an invitation to extend one leg long. Okay. So again, checking in, just noticing what this feels like in your specific body. And then lifting your opposite knee towards you. So you can do a few different things here. You can hold on to your knee, the front of your shin, if that's accessible. You could also hold on to back of thigh. And another great option is to use a strap or a belt or a towel, something that you can loop behind your thigh and hold on to draw your knee up towards you. So this will just give you a little bit more space to work with, which in some bodies is a nice addition to the pose. Okay, so whatever variation you'd like to take, okay, you might like to draw your knee towards you any amount. And then perhaps here you'll notice a bit of sensation through the hip on your extended leg, the front of the hip there. Okay. So you may like to have your foot flexed. Actually, let's try both feet flexed to keep this a little bit more engaging. Okay. And if it feels like your heel is floating off the ground, then you're welcome to find a little something to slide underneath the heel to give you that extra support. Okay. And an invitation to hang out here. Find some breaths, some even, steady breathing. Even though our feet are engaged here, you may like to invite an overall sense of softness, perhaps of gentleness here. So noticing if there's a tendency to strain or kind of over effort. And if there is, how might you invite a little bit more ease here? How might you welcome a sense of softness? And that might mean using that support of the strap or the rolled towel. Okay, it might even mean lowering your lifted foot to the floor. An invitation to continue to hang out here for a few more cycles of breath. Remember, you can always stay longer if that's what feels good for you to do. When you do feel ready to switch sides, you could begin by lowering your lifted foot if it is indeed lifted. Okay, and then here, perhaps bending both knees and switching sides. So again, you may like to kind of use your checkpoints along the way to check in with your low back. So if this feels like enough with your foot on the floor, then great. This is a great place to hang out, okay? You may like to lift your knee and find whatever variation feels right for you on this side. And something to note too is that we're asymmetrical beings, right? So you may do something different on one side versus the other, and that's totally fine. So we treat each side as its own separate experience. Okay, perhaps flexing your feet a little bit here to bring some engagement through both legs. Settling into whatever rhythm of breath is best suited for you here. So you may like to continue with your natural pace of breath, or you may like to invite an intentionally slower, deeper breath here. Again, noticing if there's any way to invite a sense of ease, observing what's happening through your upper body as well. So through shoulders, neck, jaw. What would it feel like to soften those spaces? And once again, you are always welcome to remain longer. Otherwise, an invitation for a few more cycles of breath on this side. And when you do feel ready to move out, once again, bending both knees so that your feet are on the floor and you can press your hips up to release the block and slowly lower back down. You may wish to find constructive rest pose, taking a few moments here to settle back against the earth. Once again, into that place of support, connection. And it can be nice after spinal extension, so that's that gentle back bend that we've just looked at, to bring a bit of rotation back into the spine. So you can do that by windshield wiper legs, nice and slow perhaps this time. You may even like to linger on each side for a few cycles of breath. An option to turn your head in the opposite direction of your knees as well. And you are free to continue with this movement for as long as you'd like. And of course, moving in any other way that feels instinctual and appealing to you right now. So that could be knees to chest once again, or anything else. When you feel ready to move forward, invitation to roll to one side, to press back up. Moving slow since we've been reclined for a while. Taking care as you come upright. And I want to thank you for joining me with this video. I'm always open to feedback, comments, questions, so please feel free to leave them below. And I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.